Insane. These white pastors used God to get rich. What if the people you trusted to lead your soul were secretly leading million-dollar empires? Private jets, waterfront mansions, luxury cars, all paid for through your donations. In today's jaw-dropping exposé, Legends of Black Excellence reveals the shocking truth behind some of the richest white pastors in America who may have used God as their business plan. Are they men of God or masters of manipulation? You won't believe how deep this goes. Watch until the end, and if this story stirs you, hit that like, comment, and subscribe to join the conversation. The truth starts now. Joel Osteen. Joel Osteen, born in 1963 in Houston, Texas, is one of the most recognized televangelists in America. He rose to fame not through theological scholarship or traditional ministerial training, but by taking over Lakewood Church in 1999 after the sudden passing of his father, John Osteen. Despite lacking formal seminary education, Joel transformed the modest church into a global megachurch empire, attracting more than 40,000 attendees weekly and broadcasting sermons to over 100 countries. Osteen's message is one of hope, success, and financial blessing, often described as the hallmark of the prosperity gospel. He encourages his followers to think positively, sow financial seeds through donations, and expect divine rewards. Critics, however, argue that this theology equates financial success with godliness and places undue pressure on the poor to give beyond their means, often with no tangible return. Joel's version of Christianity is polished and palatable, often avoiding controversial or doctrinal issues. Instead, he focuses on self-help style messages, emphasizing confidence, goal-setting, and envisioning a better future. He has authored multiple best-selling books, including Your Best Life Now, which have sold millions of copies and significantly boosted his personal income. His estimated net worth is approximately $50 million, yet he claims to receive no salary from his church, though he profits substantially from book sales and speaking engagements. One of the most controversial moments of Osteen's career came in 2020, when Lakewood Church received $4.4 million in federal pandemic aid under the Paycheck Protection Program. Though he later returned the funds amid public backlash, it raised concerns about a tax-exempt religious institution benefiting from government support while its leader lived in a $10.5 million mansion. Osteen also faced intense criticism during Hurricane Harvey in 2017 when his church initially failed to open its doors to flood victims. Social media backlash forced Lakewood to reverse course, but the incident left a permanent dent in his public image, with many accusing him of putting comfort over compassion. Despite the scandals, Joel remains a charismatic figure to millions. His events, such as A Night of Hope, fill stadiums, blending uplifting music with motivational preaching. For his followers, Osteen represents a divine promise of abundance. For critics, he's a savvy businessman leveraging faith for fortune. Whether viewed as a spiritual guide or a skilled entrepreneur, there's no denying that Joel Osteen has mastered the art of turning belief into big business, one hopeful sermon at a time. Franklin Graham. Franklin Graham, born William Franklin Graham III in 1950, stands as one of America's most visible evangelical leaders. As the eldest son of the legendary Billy Graham, Franklin inherited leadership roles that propelled him to prominence beyond what years of formal theological study might have offered. In the mid-1970s, he began traveling internationally on mission trips, and in 1979 he assumed the presidency of Samaritan's Purse, following the passing of his mentor, Bob Pierce. A few years later, he also took charge of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, cementing his dual roles in leadership. Under his stewardship, Samaritan's Purse evolved into one of the world's largest relief organizations, mobilizing aid for natural disasters, conflict zones, and global crises. Franklin's public persona combines humanitarian action like disaster response and famine relief, with bold proclamations on cultural and political issues, including marriage, sexuality, and religious freedom. Yet his high profile has drawn extensive criticism, particularly regarding financial transparency. Investigative reporting in 2008 revealed that he drew salaries concurrently from both Samaritan's Purse and the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, with combined compensation totaling around $1.2 million for that year. Observers questioned whether it was appropriate for one individual to earn such remuneration from tax-exempt bodies, especially while offering largely part-time oversight. Though he later asserted that he would forego one of the salaries, separate reports indicated that he continued receiving compensation from both charities. He also reportedly accepted additional retirement benefits valued at tens of thousands, further fueling debate about equitable stewardship of donor funds. In comparison to heads of larger international organizations, his take-home pay appeared significantly higher, prompting allegations of self-serving governance. Despite the financial cloud, Franklin's leadership of global relief campaigns, such as Operation Christmas Child and emergency medical aid in war-torn regions, has earned him considerable praise. Under his directives, thousands of children receive gift boxes each holiday season, and victims of earthquakes, typhoons, or refugee displacement receive on-the-ground assistance. For many supporters, his dual identity as gospel messenger and disaster responder embodies a faith active in both word and deed. Franklin is also unafraid to engage political discourse. He has voiced firm opposition to legislation and policies he perceives as contrary to biblical teachings, especially on marriage redefinition, abortion laws, and religious liberties. These stances have both garnered support in conservative circles and drawn protest from more liberal faith communities. Franklin Graham routinely fills auditoriums, conferences, and television screens with messages that blend spiritual urgency with appeals for charitable support. He encourages supporters to contribute generously to Samaritan's Purse's international efforts, suggesting that financial gifts translate directly into lives saved or uplifted. In summary, Franklin Graham represents a complex figure, a high-profile evangelical leader entwined with global humanitarian work, yet also criticized for the scale and ethics of his personal compensation. His ministries have delivered tangible relief around the world, but his income and transparency record have sparked continued debate regarding accountability and misuse of donated resources. Benny Hinn, born Tufik Benedictus Hinn in 1952 in Israel and later establishing his ministry in Florida, became one of the most recognizable televangelists of the late 20th century. He garnered a massive following with extravagant faith-healing rallies held in stadiums promising miraculous cures for illnesses ranging from blindness to cancer. Those gatherings, typically accompanied by fervent music and dramatic claims, drew legions of attendees and raised significant sums via donations from supporters who believed in divine intervention through his ministry. Despite presenting himself as a modest servant of God, several investigative reports revealed lavish displays of wealth behind the scenes. Hinn reportedly owned a luxurious home valued at approximately $685,000, along with upscale vehicles contradicting his modest income claims. His estimated net worth stands near $60 million, much of which critics attribute to money generated by televised broadcasts, book sales, and the enormous revenue produced by these global crusades. Critics accused Hinn of staging miracle services that lacked verifiable outcomes, raising ethical concerns over whether faith healings were genuine or performance-driven. Investigative journalism questioned both the claims of healing and the tactics used to solicit large financial contributions. Despite this scrutiny, Benny continued to command global attention through frequent broadcasts, best-selling publications, and high-profile appearances. Hinn authored numerous books, created broadcast programming viewed worldwide, and built a ministry brand that turned spiritual fervor into financial power. His message, often emphasizing the anointing as a divine ability granted to him, resonated with many seeking hope and healing. Supporters maintain that he faithfully served audiences hungry for spiritual renewal, while detractors argue that his methods prioritized spectacle over sincerity. At the height of his prominence, Hinn's income was predominantly derived from media-driven outreach. Crusades in large venues doubled as evangelistic events and fundraising platforms. Screening the services on television further amplified his reach and revenue. Although he denounced accusations of manipulation and performance controversy followed him for years. Over time, lawsuits and watchdog reports tarnished his otherwise celebrated reputation. Questions regarding transparency, the authenticity of reported healings, and the extent of his lifestyle financed by charitable giving prompted public debate. While many followers continued to view him as a vessel of divine power, others criticized his ministry as an example of spiritual branding used to achieve material gain. In the end, Benny Hinn's legacy is entwined with both devotion and debate, an architect of high-production religious spectacles, and an individual whose personal prosperity sparked persistent questions about the ethics of prosperity theology. Rick Joyner. Rick Joyner, born in 1949, founded Morning Star Ministries in the mid-1980s, building a multidisciplinary organization encompassing publishing conferences and religious broadcasting. His ministry became known for prophetic conferences, training schools, and written works exploring spiritual warfare and eschatological visions. Joyner's leadership positioned him as a major voice within certain charismatic Christian circles, especially among those attracted to supernatural manifestations and end-times prophecy. Over time, Morning Star's revenues grew significantly through book distribution, subscription-based publications, speaking fees, and conference registrations. By the late 1990s, the enterprise reportedly generated annual income in the millions, including contributions designated for ministry operations, property acquisitions, and leadership travel. Joyner himself took advantage of this financial base using organizational funds for luxurious personal assets, including extensive property holdings and private jet travel. Central to criticism of Joyner's leadership has been his handling of serious internal allegations. In a high-profile controversy, 3 individuals filed lawsuits against members of the ministry alleging abuse by a youth leader in 2024. Critics accused Joyner and Morning Star's senior leadership of suppressing the allegations rather than supporting survivors. The organization faced scrutiny from tax authorities over its property tax exemption, with some officials suggesting that church-owned real estate holdings and exemptions disproportionately benefited leadership rather than community service. Supporters emphasize that Morning Star also sponsors humanitarian outreach, publishes Christian instructional materials, and organizes global events aimed at equipping believers. Joyner's writings, often blending vision narratives, spiritual encouragement, and doctrinal commentary, retain a devoted readership. His influence persists among those drawn to prophetic ministry and charismatic expression. However, detractors argue that over time, clarity between divine calling and organizational ambition blurred. Expenses allocated to international travel for leadership, private residences, and lavish conference facilities raised ethical questions about stewardship. Joyner's ministry model centered on a powerful leader who interpreted supernatural visions that guided fundraising drives and strategic decisions, some alleging that prophetic authority became a tool for financial expansion. Rick Joyner remains a polarizing figure, a writer, speaker, and organizational founder respected in charismatic circles, yet widely criticized for financial opacity and institutional failures in accountability. His story illustrates how religious enthusiasm and visionary leadership can become entwined with controversy when transparency and ethical governance are compromised. Jim Bakker. Jim Bakker rose to fame in the 1970s as co-host of the PTL Club, a popular televangelist program he founded with then-wife Tammy Faye Bakker. Their ministry expanded beyond television into Heritage USA, a sprawling Christian theme park and resort complex. At its peak, the daily broadcast reached millions, and Heritage USA was drawing over $1 million in weekly revenue funds funneled into ministry operations and lavish personal projects. Despite the outward success, underlying misconduct would soon unravel. Investigative reports revealed that Bakker diverted hundreds of thousands of ministry dollars, some estimates suggest up to $1.3 million, toward personal expenses while maintaining separate accounts to conceal the truth. The organization also sold exclusive memberships worth $1,000 for a luxury hotel that was never built. Ultimately, Backer was accused of raising more money than necessary and misusing it, with massive sums kept under his control instead of being allocated to ministry needs. In 1989, these revelations led to a criminal trial in which Backer was convicted on 24 counts of fraud and conspiracy. Prosecutors demonstrated how he siphoned contributions to fund personal indulgences while closing donors' eyes to financial deception. The court sentenced him to 45 years in prison, though he served approximately 5 before winning early release. Backer's downfall became a watershed moment in American evangelicalism. Where once stood the nation's second-largest religious television network, there was scandal, loss of credibility, and a ministry in ruins. His case helped provoke public scrutiny of televangelist practices and fueled a broader debate over financial accountability within tax-exempt religious organizations. Since his release, Backer attempted a comeback by launching a revamped broadcast network and continuing to preach. But his legacy remains tainted. While some dedicates credit him with perseverance and renewal, critics see persistent echoes of manipulation and theatrics that defined his original empire. His story underscores the dangers of unchecked authority and blurred lines between ministry and greed. Paula White. Paula White established herself through ordination seminars, preaching tours, and Christian television, quickly becoming a recognizable figure within prosperity gospel circles. She co-founded Without Walls International Church in Florida before later pastoring the New Destiny Christian Center. Under her influence, congregants were encouraged to donate generously with prosperity theology, promising divine returns on financial tithes and offerings. White's ministry drew attention when investigations by the U.S. Senate Finance Committee revealed that church donors funded nearly $1 million in mortgage payments on her waterfront residence. Additionally, she publicly traveled aboard private jets and insisted ministry resources covered her salary and expenses, including those involving extended family members employed by the church. Her profile rose further when she became a spiritual advisor to U.S. President Donald Trump and later was appointed to lead the White House Faith and Opportunity Initiative in early 2025. Critics argued that intertwining political power and ministry finances complicated transparency, raising questions about whether her influence was doctrinal, political, financial, or all three. Supporters maintain that White's teachings on faith healing and personal transformation positively impacted individuals. They highlight her role in mobilizing prayer networks and outreach initiatives and providing faith-based counseling. Her public persona blends evangelical leadership with motivational speaking, self-help seminars, and media presence. Nevertheless, detractors emphasize that her advocacy for prosperity theology, coupled with questions about church expenditures, suggests an unsettling overlap between spiritual leadership and personal gain. While there's no criminal case linked to her financial practices, the optics of lavish living funded by charitable contributions have sparked ethical debate. Investigative committees found the real estate payments and salaries extended to her relatives problematic, especially given tax-exempt status. Critics argued that wealthy megachurch leaders should not benefit personally at the expense of congregants. Paula White's narrative is therefore complex, a faith-driven educator and public evangelist, bridging religion and politics, yet shadowed by controversy over finances and influence. Whether one views her as a spiritual mentor or a savvy strategist, her career spotlights the nuanced tensions between modern ministry wealth and public service. Joyce Meyer. Joyce Meyer grew up in Missouri and built a ministry centered on self-empowerment, grace, and emotional healing. Launching her teaching career in the mid-1970s, Meyer quickly expanded her reach via Christian radio broadcasts and later television, ultimately founding Joyce Meyer Ministries in the early 1980s. Her messages, often emphasizing overcoming emotional pain, renewing personal identity, and living victoriously, attracted a global following and millions in annual donations. Yet alongside spiritual success came substantial wealth. Investigative reporting in the early 2000s exposed ownership of a Canadair Challenger 600 jet, later replaced by a Gulfstream G4, reportedly funded through church contributions. Meyer and her husband also maintained multiple residences, valued in the millions, including a primary home and a secondary property for their children. Inside headquarters in St. Louis furnishings included ultra-modern conference rooms and designer decorations, such as $30,000 tables and $20,000 antiques paid for by charitable giving. Her compensation stirred debate among observers while she claimed modest personal salary ministry expenses for travel, housing, and property maintenance far exceeded typical nonprofit benchmarks. Critics questioned whether an organization committed to reach the poor should finance such luxury assets. Although Meyer defended her expenditures as necessary for ministry efficiency, and international travel transparency advocates remained skeptical about proportionality. Despite criticism, Joyce effectively leveraged book publishing, audio resources, and speaking engagements. Titles like Battlefield of the Mind and Living Beyond Your Feelings sold millions worldwide, bringing in revenue beyond standard donations. Her ministry also provided extensive humanitarian outreach via global partners and village partnerships in impoverished regions. In 2005, a four-part exposé by the St. Louis Post-Dispatch sparked national attention, detailing lavish lifestyle-funded expenditures financed through tax-exempt funds. Meyer acknowledged ownership of expensive assets, but insisted supporters consented via their offerings. Public debate flared between defenders who saw her as a modern-day preacher of biblical victory and skeptics who viewed her lifestyle as incongruent with modest Christian service. Today, she remains a fixture on Christian television and conference circuits. Programs continue to air in multiple languages, and Joyce still writes monthly devotionals read by millions. Her influence among women and church leaders persists as she blends practical teaching with testimony-driven authenticity. Ultimately, her ministry illustrates the tension between ministry growth and financial excess. For supporters, Meyer's resources enable global outreach. For critics, her prosperity reflects a prioritization of material comfort over spiritual accountability. Jentizen Franklin. Jentizen Franklin leads Free Chapel, a multi-campus church founded in Georgia in the late 1980s. Originally a musician and visionary youth preacher, he inherited leadership after the passing of Roy Wellborn, expanding the congregation from a few hundred to well over 10,000 by the early 2000s. His style centers on prophetic encouragement, fasting movements, and motivational programming, combining media-published works and organized outreach to grow both his following and income. Franklin's ministry generated substantial funds through annual campaigns, book sales, conference tickets, and televised messages. In 2017, Free Chapel launched a program to raise money for Holocaust survivors in Israel, a drive that collected roughly $4.5 million. Controversy emerged when reports alleged that Franklin personally diverted approximately $3.3 million toward unspecified ministry infrastructure or travel costs rather than delivering full support to recipients. He maintains powerful influence in conservative Christian circles, often hosting fasting initiatives that attract thousands and frequently addressing socio-political issues around faith, family, and moral values. In sermons and publications, he emphasizes sacrifice, resilience, and divine breakthrough, but reported fundraising decisions have drawn scrutiny over ethics and donor intention. Although Franklin emphatically promotes spiritual accountability, critics contend that lack of clear financial oversight and donor reporting casts doubt on integrity. Several public figures, including pastors in other ministries, have questioned the process of fund allocation and transparency thereafter. His literary output includes works such as Right People, Right Place, Right Plan, and Fasting, opening the door to a deeper, more intimate, more powerful relationship with God, distributed widely across bookstores and ministry networks. Conferences he leads often feature musical worship, keynote teaching, and personal testimony sessions, and are considered lucrative large-scale events. Advocates praise Franklin for connecting scriptural truth with practical life application, particularly in addressing circumstances of adversity. His ministry operates youth programs, global mission partnerships, and charitable drives which continue to draw generous support from his base. Yet the core question remains: does spiritual usefulness justify leadership access to resources often beyond normative nonprofit standards? Franklin contends that ministry expansion demands financial infrastructure, while critics highlight the disproportionate movement of money toward organizational leadership rather than beneficiaries. Whatever one believes, his story underscores tensions inherent in fast-growing religious enterprises, blending heartfelt conviction, broad appeal, and unresolved questions about fiscal integrity in gospel-driven fundraising. Jesse Duplantis. Jesse Duplantis is perhaps one of the most unapologetically flamboyant figures in the world of televangelism. Born in 1949, he built his Louisiana-based Duplantis Ministries into a globally broadcast platform known for loud preaching, high-energy sermons, and bold claims. But beyond the pulpit, Duplantis became infamous for his extravagant lifestyle, one he openly credits to divine favor. What set Jesse apart was not just his theology, but his open admiration for material wealth. While other pastors attempted to justify their riches with cautious language, Duplantis flaunted his prosperity. He once famously told his congregation that Jesus wouldn't be riding a donkey if he were alive today. He'd be flying a jet. Duplantis took this belief to its extreme when he openly requested $54 million from his followers to purchase a new Dassault Falcon 7X private jet. The reason his current jets, yes plural, were no longer sufficient for his global ministry needs. He claimed his worldwide congregation needed him to travel faster and more comfortably to spread the gospel. By 2006, Duplantis admitted that his ministry had already purchased 3 private jets. But instead of embarrassment, he delivered the revelation with pride, stating he was burning them up for Jesus. The controversy didn't end with jets. Duplantis owns a lavish estate and continues to live a life of comfort made possible by donations from church members who are often far less financially secure. He has been criticized for his extravagant lifestyle and failure to assist his community during crises such as Hurricane Ida, when he reportedly provided no aid or shelter despite his vast resources. Despite backlash, Duplantis remains steadfast in preaching the prosperity gospel. He teaches that giving generously to his ministry will open the windows of heaven for his followers. Ironically, while supporters keep sowing faith seeds, it's Duplantis who reaps the most visible rewards. In many eyes, he represents the epitome of a pastor who uses God not to serve, but to soar above the clouds in luxury. David Jeremiah. Dr. David Jeremiah is widely respected for his preaching books and television programs. Founder of Turning Point Ministries and senior pastor of Shadow Mountain Community Church, his image is that of a calm, scholarly teacher of the Bible. But beneath the soft-spoken demeanor lies a lesser-known story of financial controversy. Known for his deep dives into biblical prophecy and end-times teaching, Jeremiah has authored dozens of popular Christian books. These titles often appear on bestseller lists, especially the prestigious New York Times chart. However, questions began to surface around how those books achieved such status. In 2015, reports emerged suggesting Jeremiah's ministry used funds to bulk purchase his own books, potentially spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to manipulate rankings and give the appearance of organic commercial success. These alleged purchases, made using Turning Point's tax-exempt resources, helped elevate book visibility and drive further sales. While technically not illegal, critics argue it's ethically dubious to use donor money intended for evangelism to inflate a pastor's personal brand and book royalties. Former staff and media reports alleged that the ministry would buy boxes of his books in strategic bursts to meet sales thresholds for bestseller classifications. Though he never publicly admitted to directing these purchases, Jeremiah later gave thanks to those who helped in the process, further fueling suspicion. Apart from publishing, Jeremiah continues to live comfortably. He frequently travels for speaking engagements, hosts conferences, and produces high-budget broadcasts. With church members funding everything from event venues to production equipment, questions persist about where ministry ends and self-promotion begins. Supporters highlight his consistent delivery of biblical truth and argue that his popularity spreads the gospel more effectively. Yet skeptics argue that behind the polished sermons is a strategy that leverages faith-based branding for personal financial advantage. David Jeremiah's story may not be marked by private jets or flashy mansions, but it reveals a quieter, more discreet form of prosperity, one that uses influence publishing and organizational loyalty to build a financial empire in the name of ministry. Whether strategic or sanctified, his methods remain part of the broader debate. When does building God's kingdom turn into building your own? Perry Stone. Perry Stone, a charismatic voice in the world of prophecy and Pentecostal preaching, built his career on deciphering biblical end times and claiming divine insight into modern political and social events. As founder of the Voice of Evangelism ministry based in Tennessee, Stone turned his apocalyptic vision into a profitable empire of books, DVDs, conferences, and online teachings. But behind his image as a humble watchman for God lies a pattern of controversy and deep ethical questions. Stone captivated audiences with bold predictions and mysterious revelations about everything from terrorism plots to global conspiracies. In 2015, he even claimed ISIS had weapon caches hidden across the U.S. and declared he had knowledge of major political secrets like Watergate. These far-fetched claims, rather than being dismissed, were embraced by an eager audience who poured in donations and bought into his prophetic branding. His financial gain wasn't just from fear-driven teachings. Stone's ministry expanded through multiple channels, monthly partnership programs, merchandise sales, and lavish conferences. With a loyal base and a flair for dramatics, he accumulated wealth while presenting himself as a persecuted prophet. But in 2020, his image began to unravel. Multiple allegations surfaced from individuals within his own ministry claiming inappropriate behavior. A total of 11 formal complaints were reportedly filed. In response, Stone issued a public apology letter asking forgiveness from his wife and anyone he may have hurt. Despite denying criminal wrongdoing, the fallout from the allegations forced him into a temporary sabbatical. More troubling, however, was the internal response. Critics accused Stone and his leadership team of covering up misconduct to protect the ministry's reputation. While no criminal charges were filed, the wave of accusations and lack of transparency left supporters questioning whether spiritual authority had morphed into unchecked power. Still, Stone's broadcasts and teachings continue. His voice remains active in online forums, and many of his followers stand by him. Yet his career serves as a sobering reflection of how prophetic charisma can be weaponized both to gain influence and shield leaders from accountability. Kenneth Copeland. Kenneth Copeland, founder of Eagle Mountain International Church, and one of the most infamous figures in prosperity theology, has taken living in abundance to a level that stunned even fellow televangelists. With an empire that includes a private airport, a fleet of luxury jets, and a mansion worth over $6.3 million, Copeland has become the ultimate symbol of a pastor who used faith to finance opulence. Born in 1936, Copeland began his ministry after a brief stint in secular music and aviation. He gradually rose to national fame through fiery preaching and the declaration that financial wealth was a sign of divine favor. Through his daily broadcasts, conferences, and writings, Copeland sold the idea that sowing into his ministry would reap tenfold blessings. Millions believed him, and many emptied their wallets to do so. But it wasn't just the message that raised eyebrows, it was the extravagance. Copeland owns multiple private jets, including a Gulfstream 5 he proudly purchased from actor Tyler Perry. To evade public tracking of his travels, he reportedly enrolled in an FAA program that conceals flight routes. Why? Because in his own words, commercial planes are tubes filled with demons. His church is built on an $800,000 former military airbase, now home to media production studios, warehouses, and airplane hangars, all funded by donation dollars. His reasoning is always the same: to spread the gospel more efficiently. But critics argue that his need for speed has more to do with luxury than ministry. Copeland's name often resurfaces during natural disasters or social crises, not for what he gives, but for what he withholds. During the pandemic and extreme weather events, his lack of aid to suffering communities stirred outrage, especially when his own wealth could have made a massive difference. His teachings still broadcast to millions, but the optics of wealth secrecy and audacious theology have cemented Copeland as a polarizing figure. To supporters, he's a living testimony of divine prosperity. To others, he's the ultimate example of a pastor who monetized faith and called it ministry. Kenneth Copeland didn't just live like a king, he did it tax-free while promising miracles to millions. Whether he's flying above the clouds or preaching behind golden pulpits, one thing is clear: he has mastered the business of belief. So after hearing these stories, we have to ask, where does faith end and financial exploitation begin? These pastors didn't just preach prosperity. They lived it funded by the very people they claimed to serve. Is this divine blessing or manipulation in God's name? At Legends of Black Excellence, we believe truth matters. What do you think? Are these men spiritual leaders or savvy businessmen cloaked in scripture? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to help us keep exposing the truth behind the pulpit. Let's open this conversation wide.